Thank you, Markus, and good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here and also you there online. I will present some results, further results of the survey that we made last year to those who were in the Basic Income Experiment and to 5,000 in the control group. When we thought of what we're going to analyze next, we decided to start with trust and confidence. They're both very crucial when we think of the functioning of the societies. Without trust, nations would not prosper. It would not be possible for people to get up in the mornings and face the complex world. When there is trust, there can be business relations, there can be any kind of face-to-face relations between people. We need trust in order to be in contact with other people, to be socially inclusive in these societies where we live. And based on earlier research, we also know that people are more likely to comply with laws and pay taxes if they trust other people, if they trust institutions, if they trust politicians. And because trust is so fundamental for well-being, we decided to look at it first. We, of course, are going to analyze the survey further. We have a lot of questions in the survey, but in these presentations and in Signe's presentations, we are going to cover a couple of questions of the survey that we think are very, very central for individual well-being. Trust is very essential. It's something very fundamental when we think of face-to-face interaction between people. But we also need confidence. We need confidence that, for example, the chairs that you sit on don't fall down. Although I saw that Timo's chair is falling apart. But we need that trust and confidence on everyday living. We could argue that trust and confidence are kind of the same thing, but there are some certain differences, at least according to earlier research. Trust is perhaps a little bit more profounding phenomena in our lives, in the functioning of the societies, and confidence a little bit more day-to-day basis, feeling of not getting hit by a car when you cross the street, for example. Without confidence, we need the confidence in future. We know that without confidence and trust, we can't feel well. The well-being of those who have less trust is on lower level. And when we think of the unemployed job seekers that we have in the Basic Income Experiment, among them, it's also very crucial to have the trust and confidence, because if you don't have the confidence in, for example, in the employment possibilities, you don't have enough strength to search for a job. It affects your well-being, and in the long term, it causes stress and lowers your health and subjective well-being. And in the lives of the unemployed, there may be disappointments, different kind of disappointments when you search for a job and you can't get it, and you're very enthusiastic about something that is perhaps available for you based on your education, based on your abilities, then you can't get it. And after months of trying to search for a job, nothing comes up, you can't get a job, and you feel very disappointed. It deteriorates your confidence. Again, we know, as our Director General spoke in the opening words, that people need confidence in having, for example, when we from Kela pay out benefits people, that they get it. They get the money to their bank accounts once a month so that they can buy food, clothing, and all the basic needs. And if the system is too bureaucratic and they don't know when they get the money, it's of course, it causes stress also, and disappointing if you've been expecting to get something and you don't get it, and a lot of financial stress, which Signe is going to talk about in her presentations. We looked at three different dimensions of trust. Firstly, we looked at the trust in other people. It's very important, the generalized trust, whether you can trust other people, for example, loaning them money. Do you trust that they will pay you back? We know that in Finland and in other Nordic countries, the level of trust has been very high, much higher than in other European countries, for example. And actually, I just looked at from the last European Social Survey in Finland. The level of generalized trust is among the highest in European countries. Only in Norway it's a little bit higher. And it's actually the same, it's 6.8, and it's the same as in the treatment group of, meaning those who were in the basic income experiment. In the treatment group, the average of the generalized trust in other people was 6.8. That is exactly the same as in the whole population in Finland in 2018. And I would say that's a quite amazing result, that after 2 years receiving basic income, your trust in other people has increased to the same level as among the whole population. Whereas in the control group, it has stayed on a low level, it's 6.3, and it represents the trust generally observed among unemployed people. It's usually on a much lower level than in the population overall. And we controlled, when we did this analysis, we controlled for background variables, and these differences between groups remain significant after controlling, for example, gender, age, income, education, health, and area of residence. So we can say that basic income receivers trusted, in the end of the basic income experiment, trusted other people more than the control group. Although in the beginning of the experiment, they were more or less alike. Here we can see, after controlling the background variables, how groups differ according to gender, education, health, and area where they live in Finland. There are differences between women and men, and interestingly, the basic income experiment have affected only women, so that women who received basic income trusted more other people than those women who didn't receive basic income. When it comes to men, there is no difference, and that's very interesting, and we have to look at it further. Also, there were differences between the educational groups, not so much when the education was on higher level, but on low educational groups there was more difference when it comes to trust in other people. Again, when it comes to health, there were differences between groups, but in every group, whether you had health problems or not, and when you received basic income, you trusted more other people. There are also differences between the regions in Finland, how people trust in other people, or whether they are in the control group or treatment group, whether they received basic income or not. And there are really interesting differences between the residential areas, but we can't go to that now more deeply, but we definitely will analyze that more in the future. Then we asked about trust in politics. Actually, we asked about trust in political parties, trust in politicians, trust in parliament, and we formed, based on these three variables, we formed a sum variable, when 0 means no trust at all, and 10 means that you have a complete trust in politics. And again, we can see a difference between treatment and control group. In the treatment group, trust is in the average 4.5, and in the control group 4.0. And again, the differences remain significant after controlling for background variables. But you can see that trust in politics is on a lower level than trust in other people, and this is again general. This is not just something in Finland, but overall in other countries too. When it comes to, for example, gender on health, there are again differences between the groups. How much do you trust to politics? Women tend to trust more in politics, independent of belonging to the treatment group or not. Again, in the lower educational groups, the treatment, the basic income experiment has more effect. So in the lower educational groups, there is more difference between the groups' interest in politics, whether you belong to the basic income receivers or not. Region, in this case, there are some differences, but they are not significant. When it comes to health, if you had no health problems, the trust was higher in the treatment group. But when you had health problems, it didn't matter if you received basic income or not. You trusted as little as, to politics as if you didn't receive basic income. Then we asked about trust in justice institutions, police, and courts, and formed a sum variable based on two variables measuring trust. Again, scaling from 0 to 10. Means for treatment group was 7.2 and for control group 6.9. And it was significant, but after controlling the background variables, there were no longer a significance between these groups. So when it comes to these kind of very traditional institutions, there were no difference between these groups. But when it comes to trust in other people or trust in politics, there is significant differences. Then we asked about confidence in one's future, confidence in one's financial situation, and ability to influence some social issues. And we know that for individual well-being, it's very important that people feel that they can participate, they can be socially included in the society, they can actually influence their own things, their matters. The scale in this case was from 1 to 5, 1 meaning no confidence at all, and 5 complete confidence. Means for treatment group, the mean was 3.2, and the control group 2.9. And the difference remained significant even after controlling for background variables. There were differences, especially between the educational groups and health groups. When you received basic income, regarding whether you have health problems or not, you trusted, you had more confidence on your future, more confidence. And if you had higher education, or independent of education, you had more confidence when you received basic income. Conclusions. When you received, if you were in the basic income experiment, you trusted more people after 2 years of experiment, because in the beginning the people were the same. They were selected randomly from the same group of people receiving unemployment benefits from Kela. So originally they were the same. After 2 years of having basic income, those who received basic income trusted other people more. They trusted more politicians, politics, and they had more confidence in their future, more confidence about their possibilities to influence social matters. And when we looked at the trust in other people, we observed that it's actually at the same level as in the population as a whole. So people receiving basic income can actually trust other people as much as, for example, we all here. There are, of course, we can criticize not only these results, but the survey that we made last year. What we also brought up in February when we presented the first result, the response rate was really low. It was about 30% among the basic income recipients and about 20% among the control group, so it's very low, and we have to consider that when we do further analysis. We may have some selection bias. This was a phone survey, and also that we have to look again a little bit deeper. Who are those who actually answer the phone? Is there differences between the groups? The preliminary results of this selection kind of analysis shows that there is not very many differences between the groups. That has to be, of course, taken into account when making any conclusions when we are going to publish the last results next year. It can be also criticized, this survey, that it deals only with opinions, only with subjective measures. But we know that subjective well-being, when we measure subjective well-being, it actually can predict quite well also the objective, kind of objective well-being. We can observe the level of people's well-being by asking them how they feel. For example, health. We know that when we ask people about their subjective health, it actually tells a lot about people's actual health and their need for health services. So it's very important to ask people how they feel, what are their subjective ideas about their well-being. And thus, although there are some restrictions in the survey, I would say that it's very important that we have done it. And today we are going to hear also from the interview study, and that's also a very important part of this research. Thank you.
Maybe Minna, you could stay here for one question. So who would ask the first question from Minna? Please wait for the microphone so our online audience will also hear you.
Good morning. These surveys, they were done only after the experiment, but not before.
The survey was done in the end of last year, so it was made a 1 month before the experiment ended. That's also a very good question, because it can affect both the response rate and the answers. Sorry.
It looks like the basic income could be a very good political tool, in a sense, because it seems that the people's trust is increased. And of course it is. If they see opportunity of the changes, positive changes, of course it increases. And the other thing, we've been talking a lot about significant and insignificant statistical results, which is a little bit misleading, because in such a small samples, when we talk about results not being significant, the conclusion is we don't have the evidence enough to make any kind of claims, which doesn't mean the groups are not the same or the groups are the same. It means we don't not have enough evidence. So I needed to share this. Thank you.
Of course, when the response rates was quite low, we still have quite a lot of respondents. So I would say that there is enough respondents to do quite reliable analysis, even with kind of regression analysis. So it depends, but it may be that when we look at compare many groups, then can be that single groups may be very small, and then we can ask whether we can find any significances. But we can continue the discussion after the seminar. Yeah.
So we will have a second question, and then we will move on to Signe's presentation.
The question is related to this, that how you explain that so few people answered that questionnaire? Because they were in participating in this experiment, and I personally expect that they are willing to say something about it.
I would expect too. We can see this kind of phenomena in all surveys today, in at least in Finland, I think in other countries too. I know that, for example, in Utrecht, Timo can tell about more. You have received a higher response rate, and we are really interested to hear more. How did you do that? I think we have to, in the future, give people different kind of options to answer, kind of other printed version of the questionnaire or phone survey, or that we have to provide more possibilities for people to answer these surveys, not just by phone or not just by kind of old-fashioned paper survey. But why did they? not want to answer why did they, as Otto told, very many of those who received basic income actually applied for unemployment benefits and wanted to be part of the service system. So there are a lot of questions that we still have to answer. This has been a really interesting experiment, and we have very good data. Although the response rate was low, we can still do, I think, very good and reliable analysis based on that. Thank you.